Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for your virtual tour of Will McGarvey's exhibition, Sticks and Stones. It's currently installed in in OMAH's multi-family gallery. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take a virtual tour around. It's going to take about 40 minutes or so, and at the end we urge you to ask as many questions as possible. Please ask questions. So there are two ways that you can do that. You can write a question in the chat for us. Or if you want to raise your hand, the lovely Monica is pumping out right now. She will make sure to unmute you so that you are able to ask as many questions as you like. Okay. So if you just want to remind you where is a parental advisory, there are some sections of this exhibition that are for so please viewer be advised, but we will get started around 7:30. So there is some time for that. Okay. So again, about 40 minutes. If you have any questions, ask away. Before we get started, I would like to do an acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Ojibwe, the Dawa, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. Thank you so much, everybody. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Will McGarvey for his exhibition, Sticks and Stones. Take it away, Will.
Thank you, Tanya. Welcome, everyone. We are here to take a tour since we aren't allowed to be in galleries yet. They're dangerous still. We're in that phase of this pandemic, but welcome to Sticks and Stones. We're going to give you the full tour, and then hopefully one day you'll be able to come in here when we're open and take a look at the work for itself. Sticks and Stones, from a broader perspective, are they're a collection of pieces that are interrelated. And the sticks and stones could be the forests and the mountains, or the lumber and the grains of sand on a beach or something. So sticks and stones are broad, and sticks and stones can also be weapons. But in my case, my weapons are my paint. And so the work in this show includes landscape, and landscape is kind of embedded in me as a Canadian artist. Maybe it's part of our souls, maybe because we have this wonderful landscape that is really something many of us appreciate in such a great manner. One of the things we love about our country. And so our landscape, I deal with some politics of how we protect it, how it has evolved, how we've got to this point. Climate change and various crises that are dealt with in the show, and some of the shows. Some of the work here is just looking at the beauty of landscape. We take a look at this. This first painting is called Carbon Redline. So this is a recent landscape, and I've really simplified it down to some basic formal and color shapes. This is actually a place I visit often, which is up on the Ottawa River, up towards Petawawa, and I love being up on this hill and looking down at the river, which I originally had painted like a actual blue water river, and that was a white cloud, and that was a beige sidewalk going through. But then I sort of thought, no, I used red in my paintings to put a focus on things. Sometimes it's blood. It's representing blood. Sometimes it's representing danger. Sometimes I just like red, so I'll put it in there. But in this case, I thought, well, I'll paint the river red. And then the cloud became ominous because, maybe I listened to something on the news about, more carbon change, or, melting ice caps, large chunks of the Antarctic breaking away, or whatever it's been, the death of reefs. And as a diver, I really appreciate reefs in good shape, and we all should. And then the red line, and it became a thing about a red line. And I used to play with cars and motorcycles when I was younger. Still a bit of a car guy, but not really a collector. Too much hassle, no time. But a red line on an automobile is when things get to the danger point. So I started to say, okay, well, that makes sense. We'll call it a red line for Earth, because we're at that point where we should be paying attention. We've got to make changes. We've got to do all these things. So carbon red line was a little bit of comment on the carbon issue and the greenhouse gases and the raising temperatures. So let's move over here, and I'll show you this next little group of paintings is actually about process, and it's about random things that form into some kind of image or object or something random that happens in your life. This next series is a little bit about recycling, upcycling. For decades, I've collected palettes, and they build up to the point where the craters are too big. You can't mix your colors properly. Every palette is like a diary of your colors. So a few years back, I thought, well, I'm going to scrape these down randomly on wood panels. And so this was the first one that you saw over there, called the Trickster. This one's called Mandatory Bat Masks, probably a comment about COVID, because by then we were into it. This one is called Blurs in Flight. And I was asked, what's a blurred? What kind of blurred? Well, this was the second painting. The first one sort of looked bird-like. This one looks like blurred birds. So it's a blurred. And the third one is snail tracks on planet B. So again, that's a bit of an environmental comment that, you know, we move slowly, change happens slowly, and we don't have a planet B. So take care of this one. Hold on. I know you're going to push me forward, but I'm going to slow you down for 1 minute. Let me just tell you about these, because when I said about palettes, these paintings are scrapings that are randomly placed on these wood panels for whatever number of months. And these take probably, 6-8 months to scrape enough paint. And I put it down randomly. And then after a certain period of time, I start to put the colors that are left scraping off my working palette. I place them in certain areas, because then I start to see something. And then as we get to the end of this process, I get this an image forming. So then I may add just a few lines and a bit of a wash in the background. And then I've made something usually fairly abstract, which is good. And so that's the process that's really important, because I love process. I love actually, painting itself. The finished paintings are great, but I kind of like that whole experience of brushes, colors, never knowing what's going to happen. So Tanya's waving me forward. I'm past time, but I'll slow. So this next painting is this is a landscape painted at a favorite place that I get to go to once a year. Mark and Leanne Fletcher's place, Rancho Relaxo, and a lot of artists in the area get to go there. So I go up to this one same place often. And so I keep, this is just about shape and form and tone and color. And I try to paint it differently every time. But this is a little bridge, and this is the little stream that runs through there. And I've simplified everything else. And it's really a layered, so it's a little different technique I use at this time. And so that's one way I see a landscape at that time. I painted it in that way. And then this next piece is called Morning Light on Water's Edge. So I get inspiration from not only being in the land, but I get inspiration from social media too. Everybody today has a camera in their pocket. Everybody posts so many things. Some of them just think they're journalists and they put down a comment, but that's not journalism anyways. But photographers, every once in a while, you'll see images, then you go, wow, that's a really cool shot. Whether it's a person or whether it's a place they've been, or this one was off a cell phone off my grandson's, and he showed this picture, and I thought, wow, I love the light of that. And he snapped that one morning. And so I just, it's quite a different treatment. It was a different treatment for me to paint it this way, with everything kind of moving. It's a bit impressionist or expressionist, and it's a lot about shape and lines and just the elements of painting. So that's another way I approach landscape. Next in the show is I think this has been influenced by the current state of our universe right now. We're all in the midst of something that we've never had to deal with, and nor has anybody really for about 100 years, with the exception of small outbreaks of various things. And that, of course, is this COVID-19. And we're all forced into bubbles, isolated, social distancing. And we're not good with social distancing. We have family, we have friends. It's affecting us. And so I started to paint this last year, mid-year. And this one's called Hope on the Horizon in World War C. Because really, we're spending more money than we spent on a war, but this is a war. We just can't see the enemy. And yet it's killing us. And maybe it's just Mother Nature back on us, because that's what the world does. We don't control nature. She kind of controls us. So this shows, the marketing graphic, a distorted view of a marketing graphic. It shows a red sun, which is unusual. I've changed the color of many things around. It's a dark painting, and it's got lots of depth and lots of little splitting off, perhaps viral things. And it's got this bit of light on the horizon, which says we do have hope. And then we've got these misshapen figures on the bottom. And this, to me, is what we're going through. We're not changing, physically. We're changing, though, in how we greet people, how we go out, how we see people. So I've made some human type forms and made them dance, gave them weird shapes, and say that, this is us. We're, this is a sort of a representation of where we are. So the next piece is got familiar forms, circles, lines, shapes, sort of figurative. Are they animal? Are they partially human? They're distorted. Nothing's quite in focus, or things are, there's things in the ground here. Are those, is this lily pads here, or what's with the greenish yellow circle? I love that color, and it's a bit of red by it. And then I've X'd it out. I put lines over to block it out. And these are dream-like paintings. So I don't know about you, but when I dream, they can get really vivid. Things come from all different times in my life, and characters and people I haven't seen, or places I've been, and they recombine themselves. And then sometimes when you try to recall the dream, it's like nothing quite comes into focus. 1 minute it's clear, the next minute it's like, okay, why isn't that coming back? So these are just sort of trying to paint dreams in a sense. In an abstract fashion. Again, this is another painting over here. This one is called Black Marks on the Landscape. And this is again out at Rancho Relaxo. And it's in a different place. It's painted from the bridge. And I was trying some different techniques. And I was really, I love the subtle light effects. And I love subtle colors. So I was layering these colors and not using, the colors of the landscape, but using basic forms. And again, I used straight, strong lines for either verticality for the trees, or to, as power, I guess lines, or just markings on it, like it's just, this is the rhythm. So we take a pattern out of the rhythm of our environment, whether it's circles or arcs or paisleys or whatever, that comes from our environment. So I just, simplified it and pulled those design features out. And there's a couple of little pieces here. There are a few little pieces in the show. I started doing these smalls about 6 or 7 years ago. And I wasn't used to working in a small space and didn't know if I could really work with it. And it's amazing after a while how much you can start to put into a small space. So these are called The Release and Three Souls Float Away. These are coming from landscapes. These both started as landscapes, one I think in Temagami and one on the Ottawa River. And won't go into some of the things of my last year of life, but there's some personal stuff there. So coming to the third room we're in already. And here we are, and you're looking at the Ottawa River in February on the coldest day of 2019. It was -40. And the light over the hills in Quebec across the river was really layered like this, the layer of the clouds and the sky. And it was just sort of an inversion or something, but the colors and the fact that the folks up there, so I get back into looking at our landscape as a Canadian. We've got 4 great seasons, and maybe I don't love winter as much as I used to because I don't really get up and do things in the winter. But I love the fact that we have these distinct seasons. So it gave me an opportunity to look at this, break it down formally, paint some ice and snow. But the folks up there take trailers, I mean camping trailers, onto the ice, set them up. I don't know how they get the holes cut and fish all winter, but it was really cool. They're not using little ice huts. They're using 15 and 20-foot trailers out there and driving their trucks out and staying there for the weekend kind of thing and having all the conveniences. Anyways, I thought it was a really Canadian scene, you know, and I just love the simple beauty and I don't know, when it's that cold, the silence is just spellbinding. This next painting, again, is from Rancho Relaxo. This is called Forest Light. This was one I did in 2020 in the fall when we were able to go outside and keep some distance from each other. And I painted down near the river or the stream that runs through, and there was a bit of light sparkling through. And I was into simplifying and using some other colors and really looking at reflected light. I guess maybe this was done after that other morning light. So I wanted to play with the shapes and simplify it and not worry about depth. I was keeping it on a sort of a single plane, I guess. And so I was flattening, you know, that old cubist technique of flattening the planes and going this way. Okay. So that painting influenced a whole bunch of things in the show. And so it's amazing how things that you do come back. You know, my work has been cyclic for years. I don't paint, I paint in different themes and different narratives and different structures that are maybe more singular in their approach to a question or a concern or a challenge, or, you know, something that I want to work through. But this show had a lot of different elements. So, and I have a lot of different things that interest me. So that me as a person, I'm like a jack of all trades in some things, and I won't use the rest of that. Hopefully I master a few by the time I get to this age. But anyways, this is called Morning Dew. And once again, that's a social media image that an old school friend from university had posted, and it was taken, I believe, at her farm out in Eastern Ontario. And it was this really wonderful atmospheric shot of the morning out over the fields. And so it looks like winter. It really wasn't. I just happened to keep playing with the color till I got some combinations I liked. And it's you know, everything, the barn, the silos, and the sky and the clouds all sort of were covered with this misty gray. You having technical problems, or should I keep talking? Okay. Sorry, folks.
I'm just reading the chat, that's all.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyways, that again was a way of treating a landscape. This painting is probably the most recent. I used some of that last minute energy and maybe some Hockney influence or something that I've looked at his work for years and years. But I took my Forest Light, and I just wanted to put some of the lines and shapes and the rhythms and play with some different colors. You know, I wanted this just to have the really simplified abstract of the elements of nature. So, you know, water and trees and, you know, fallen trees and rock and whatever else I put in there. Whatever else you can read in there is fine with me. And this one is called Social Isolation. This too was one of the pieces that I painted with that creative energy that comes to artists if they're lucky when they're getting close to a show. And I wasn't, believe me, I was still working on lots of things, but I didn't have anything that was coming to mind to sort of get onto a canvas at that late hour. And one day I saw another image from a friend who's up in a Temagami, and this was a picture of his fish hut in the melting ice of the winter this year. And a few snowmobile tracks had drawn lines across the landscape, and they happened to make this lovely, diagonal line, which, you know, in picture terms, draws your eye in, and then the horizon flattens it out, and then you come back into this lovely rhythm. Anyways, the fish hut was orange. And I had this little picture off of Facebook, and I pulled it out and I thought, that's cool. Why did he paint it orange? But Derek's a real practical guy. He's a friend from Bear Island, and I go up there and stay with him at his place. And Derek's, this orange was an orange tarp, which is very practical because it's windproof, rainproof, and really easy to set up. And so he rigged up this, and this is actually a rather large fish hut. I got to see it last month. And it's actually, it looked kind of small in the picture, but it was actually about 10 feet by 6 or 8 feet. So it was pretty big. And, but what it said to me is, here's this portentousness of nature and this melting ice. And we're kind of in that phase of the pandemic where we're getting some light, we're getting some hope. We've been in this long winter as people isolated, because we tend to isolate a little bit in the winter. That's Tanya letting me know I'm getting. That's 20 minutes, just in case you wonder, going like that. Anyways, we're in this thaw. We hope we're going to get through phase 3 and not get a phase 4. But I thought, you know, this one lone fish hut on this vast landscape tells us what we are as humans. We are very, you know, small. We're all living in isolation now. So I used a little play on words, but I thought it was just such a beautiful image that I had to paint it. And I thought it was a good statement for where we are. And if you look down there on the far horizon, there is a little bit of either sunrise or sunset around those trees at the back. So there is a little bit of hope that we're going to get through the winter. The ice is going to melt. Things are going to get normal again. So that's a bit about where that came from. This painting is in a little village of Maynooth on the way up to Petawawa, where I make trips through all these little towns. And I've gotten to know a whole bunch of people there. There's a lot of hip people in Maynooth. It's a very cool little spot. This isn't a plug for you, Maynooth, but just if you ever go there, they got craft shops and antique shops and a great little cafes and a church at one end of the main street and a purple bar at the other end of the main street where all the action happens. What I really liked was, again, this was late winter and the snow was getting kind of mucky, and we really want to see either clean snow or spring show up and wash it away. And there was one person walking. So I just put these, you know, this typical Canadian landscape in dirty, muddy conditions with strong shadows at the end of winter. So follow me. Tanya's going to make a really tight passageway here. Where are we going next? Oh, this one. Okay. So this next series, this next little group, even though it's, again, political, but not as political as the stuff that's coming up, this one is called Buffalo Slaughter Irony, Feeding the Children Mercury. So painting this, again, was about things we've done to this place we live, this wonderful earth that we get to live on the skin of. And if you'll notice over here, there are some buffalo. not saying they roamed around our neighborhood here, but they did roam in the millions, and they were slaughtered for trophies and coats. And they were a dependable food source for the people who lived here. And now we've got one lonely cow looking across a fence because he has to be, or she has to be, put in spaces, fed whatever diet, maybe it's grass fed, but he's looking out at us going like, does this really make sense? Like, these guys got to roam free. My brother's back here from another mother, and I'm standing here. And here you've got a predator, a coyote, and prey over here, a family of rabbits. So, that's nature. It's about these things. And this woman is drinking from a puddle of fallen rainwater. The sky is sort of ominous, yellow and mustard and greens. That what am I saying? Okay, it comes before storms. Have you ever seen the tornadoes show up? Purple or not purple, there's yellow, mustard yellow, or green or brownish skies, and there's very severe dividing lines. For the tornadoes that have hit near where I've been and seen the skies, that's what they look like. So again, it's a troubled time with our Earth. And, the mercury is that's a reference to the English Wabigoon river system, which was poisoned by industrial processes and still isn't cleaned regardless of what government has been in power. So somebody has to start doing something instead of, talking about it. All right. This over here is two paintings. This first one's called The Refuge. And again, it's got a red line, and that red line represents basically the Atlantic Ocean, because this is about the rich came to this country, our country, to Canada, to find what they could find and take away the riches, whether it was furs, whether it was lumber, to build more ships, to go more places and colonialize those places. And that's the history. And we can't change that. We could certainly improve how that has evolved. And one lone tree, it's even squared off to make timber, to take back to Europe, England, or wherever it was taken. And on the top is the Refuge. And the Refuge is actually where Tanya lives. This was Art Schilling's studio, and has been a Schilling home and studio ever since the time it was first built in components. And it's kind of a refuge. It's a way to go and take yourself away from whatever and express yourself, tell stories, paint what you needed. So it's kind of a thing of beauty coming out of this, everything that had to be experienced in the lives. So that's a little bit about what that's about. And over here is Sticks, Stones, and Shelter. Again, well, it was painted in the studio after one of my paintings that I did out at Rancho Relaxo, when the spring was, water was running over the rocks. And I just, created an abstract version of that. I put a little bit of Matisse's fishes down in the corner, and then I put shelters of people who got along better with their land. So I just painted colors and shapes because I happen to like it. But it is a landscape, an abstract of sorts, and I think it works myself. Now, and I'm biased, maybe. This is another painting similar to the last one, only I had to do something else with that. I couldn't let that image go just with one piece. So I did a smaller second piece called The Last Snow Angel. So now that I'd said that was the social isolation, as people were starting to feel, there's a little bit of humor in here, is that we're getting to that some things are absurd stage. And we're feeling out of sorts. And the person who maybe lives in that little single fish hut or dwelling on the ice, as the snow is melting, he's gone outside and relived a part of his childhood, making a snow angel. Somebody thought he said he was spread out dead on a cross, but I said, no, look, on the snow. There's an angel there, just like we did when we were kids. So somebody is having a little bit of play in this time of turmoil or that we're in. But again, the same thing. I've showed the land receding and the lines of the snowmobile tracks drawn, sketched on the surface of the snow or the ice. And again, a little bit of light on the horizon to say, we will get through this, don't worry. That's me or somebody like me. So I love, again, doing these small paintings. And I use them to either, to make something it's meant to fit small spaces, because lots of people I know have only little spaces left. And it also lets me, figure something out that I might do in a larger piece. So these are really simplified. This is using various tones and breaking down the landscape into some simple geometry forms. And I just threw red in there because I liked it. I don't even know what those red things were, but I liked red things. So there they went. And so these are two little pieces that I happen to love doing these. So back onto a little stormy weather, back onto more about our changing climate. This time I put a little bit of a human form to a rather ominous cloud. This actually was very similar to a cloud that when we talked about tornadoes, when my wife and I were skirting the weather, driving between Aurelia and southwestern Ontario, where I used to live, where we both used to live. So we're in the sort of flatlands and in Mennonite country at this point. And the storm was raging and we skirted the edge of it and we could see it. And we heard it on the news that, this was going to be really go right across Ontario. It had already been across Michigan. And this storm was the day that the tornado hit in Ottawa about, 3 years ago or so now. And on the road out there was a small horse-drawn buggy, and that sort of refusal to take on modern conveniences, this connection to the land and to things non-mechanical. But I love the land down there because the land is flat. The skies are huge. The skies are like they are out west. So if you want big sky, go to like Chatham, go to, anywhere down in southern Ontario, you can see the sky. You don't see many stars at night because it's pretty well lit around there, but you get amazing clouds and you get amazing western skies, or prairie skies, I guess is more. And the light is different than what we get here. And this one, again, the approaching storm. This was the little town of Aurelia. And again, a storm is coming, whatever that means for us. We don't know, but it was just, it was another one where I've decided I'll put a human face on the cloud and I'll put this sort of, real strong reds coming across and smashing into the earth. Mind you, that's about the 5th paint over on that picture. This one I quite like. The winter one was okay, but I didn't like it as much as this. So if they scrape that away, they'll find 3 or 4 more paintings under it. So follow me and be forewarned that, what was the designation on this? Let me see. It says viewer advisory, so just be advised. And the room contains images that may be sensitive or offensive to some viewers. We advise caution before entering, so you don't have to come in. However, they are a little bit, they're meant to be uncomfortable. The series of paintings is political. I guess we've talked politics ever since I was a kid around the table. As some of you may know, Dad was a journalist, and that meant every night we'd talk something what was going on in the news. And he was in this, in Israel right after the '67 war. He was in Detroit and got locked across the border when the riots were on. When he came home, thankfully, we said, wow, were you afraid of the people there that were rioting? And he said that what scared him the most was the National Guard, which we found, well, as young hippies, we said, yeah, right on, because Kent State was going to come in a few years, and we knew what they were like. This painting is called White Night Shirts for Red Hats and Blue Lines. And this whole last 4 or 5 years of what do you want me over here? I can't remember. Here, yeah, okay. This last political, the politics of the US under the last president, who shall not be named, brought out, gave permission to people to be who they were. They were going to make America great again. And what did that mean? And to some people, it meant some pretty ugly things. And I saw them as, you know, most of them were just racist things. And racism is a problem we have to deal with. And this painting was, when I started to research, because I'd seen an image of a Klansman 2 months after Donald Trump got in, and I wasn't supposed to say his name, got in, was being interviewed on a back road outside of Greensboro, North Carolina. And this was a person in full brand new satin green Klan outfit. And I didn't know, like, what's a green Klan outfit? So I started to research the Klan and what did this mean? What was that person? And why did he feel empowered to be able to do that? Anyways, when I did that, I started finding these images. This was from a convention. It was a photograph of a convention in Washington in August 1926. I told you I'm going to take a few minutes in here, so bear with me. But I won't be too long. And this was a legitimate convention, if I can use that, of in Washington, D.C., walking down Pennsylvania Avenue. At that time, it was a few years after D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. In 1926, the Klan in America was at its peak. They didn't give up after that war they had the century before. There were 3 million Klansmen in the USA. You could go online and order Klan outfits or clown outfits or whatever you want to call them from the catalog. It was almost like a Sears catalog. So I went and I found these, you know, what these symbols were and what the colors meant and all this other nonsense. Anyways, I painted a few of these people. Some of them are dedicated, some are perhaps a little bit naive or maybe even dumb, and others are kind of questioning, you know, this fella here's kind of got dressed up and maybe he's a younger member and he maybe looks like he's kind of starting to doubt himself, which he needs to do. And so this was the peak, and this was a scary image to see that this actually happened. Like, this wasn't the Moose Lodge, the Elk Lodge, the Orangeman, or whatever other, you know, types of social clubs that were at the time. This was the Klan. And regardless of what they try to present themselves at, they're nothing more than a bunch of murderous thugs. I hope this doesn't go anywhere where they get my name. So the other things they do is they use Christian symbols. They use a cross. They burn crosses on lawns of people they want to terrorize. So this one is called The Sheriff Wore White. And that's a comment on today's society, today's police, as this is when I say blue lines. I'm speaking about police. And I'm not speaking about the good ones. I'm speaking about the other ones. And I'm speaking to the people who don't say things against the ones who they don't like their behavior or the way they are. They just bystand. And we see from George Floyd's case that we may see a change in that with charges and things happening. We hope that this is a change in our racism problem in North America. We have racism too, not to the degree, but there certainly are racists here. So the sheriff wore white because nobody did anything about cross burnings and murders in the 50s and the 60s and the 40s and the 70s even, and so on. When a president says MAGA. So this is an early picture of a Klan when they didn't quite have their outfits figured out. They didn't have their pointy hats. So they were wearing flour sacks, anything to hide their faces. They were so proud to be good white Americans, they hid their faces while they went out and terrorized the population of Black people in the States, particularly in the South, but not just in the South. And there were a few groups of them in Canada. Now, we still have some groups that have been now banned. Thank you, Proud Boys, you can go away. And over here is something I never do, very rarely do, paint portraits, paint fabric. This was the picture that I saw in the paper which would hit a news cycle, and a week later it'd be gone because we're on to the next thing. And this is the one I saw in February, right after Trump was elected, and that disturbed me so much to think that this person would feel confident that he could dress up because he can be who he really is. And it's really scary. So I called this the man in the red hat. And it is a disturbing image, and I don't know where these would ever hang. I do these because they're coming from me. I have to protest. These are my sticks. These are my weapons, my paintbrush, whatever, my sculptural tools. So yeah, it's disturbing. It's not a pretty image, and yet it's something that I said, this needs to stay until it goes away. You know, this is saying you need to put a lens on this and you need to deal with it. And hopefully we're making progress. So this one here is called American Utopia. So this is an empire, as which US has been the world's empire for the last, 100 years or so, Industrial Revolution forward or something. And the buffets are just tremendous. And so this sort of shows details about weirdness, somebody with not a butter knife in their hand and a rabbit hat on, they're morphing into strange beings. There is automatic weapons, open carry. I've got my rights under that Second Amendment. A child being shot, because children are being shot quite frequently. If you look at accidentally, and they got shot in Toronto last week again. So children get shot by guns. Gun culture is terrible. Little boys get abused by priests who we worship and, call religion when they betrayed any religious. Sorry for anybody that doesn't like that, but that's what happens. And it's sad because if your faith can't be trusted, what have you got? And we all know what happened now, and we've known for a long time about residential schools. So once again, we've got a spotlight on the church. And no, I won't just pick on one church. And in the windows of the outside, I've got some Proud Boys. Thank you, Canada. Thank you, West, for coming up with that great name. And now you're banned in Canada, and in the US, they become quite strong, and they wear yellow jackets and show what great citizens they are. And there's me painting and Martha Graham dancing, because in America, as much as I say, hey, look at this terrible stuff, there are far more people down there, or a majority of people, who are reasoned in their approach to people. People are people, and they don't ever own guns, and they're never been racist. And so, but it takes a long time to shift the population. So this one is called Kingfish Needs a Horn Section. So this was inspired during one of the rallies that was pre-Trump being elected. And there were all these macabre looking, spoiled little rich kids screaming and yelling for their new leader, the Wonderland Trump man. And if they don't have these people, they wouldn't have had a leader like the last 4 years. And I'm afraid, we might see that again if we're not careful, or they might. And that means not good things for us here either. But you have to have support, or you're never going to lead, So that's what that one's about. And this one, we'll rush through these last few because we got 2 more pieces to show you and just a few minutes to go. So that one is sort of like the empire is collapsing, as the empire is falling over, the flowers are spilling, the beauty is there, but empires inevitably collapse. So come out here and we'll spend the last few minutes and come over and This is a year and a half or more, and this is almost like the color diary for most of the paintings in here got their residue scraped onto this very large wooden palette. And And so this is called Redline on a Blue Planet. So this was one that I did the same random thing. I walk around the canvas and I put the scrapings down, and then eventually I start to put them on. And in the end, I put a few lines. And until about a month before, this was actually called Postcards from a Shaman, because it had a figure on there and a rather large head and arms. And then at the end, I thought, no, I'd been to see the Murrow Museum and that year, and I came back and I thought, oh, I know I'm going to put a big line around it. I'm not happy with this. And I made a few simple lines, and then I really liked what was done. It was more like the planet. It was more like a human. It had a moon. It had, the COVID hairdo, that was done before COVID. So those little planetary blips aren't actually a COVID reference. But the red line, again, is really about, we've only got, we got one planet. Let's take care of it. And, so that's what this was. But that, again, as I say, that is a color diary of my last, year and a half of work, which takes in a lot of this. So, and I don't have a lot of time, but you can pan across this. This painting is one that I started inspired by that one painting over there called Forest Light. And there are 4 panels here. This is 16 feet by 5 feet. And it's called Cherry Blossom Life on Wonderland Avenue. And of course, where we live is Wonderland. So I had to, figure out what this painting was all about. But it started out with this panel here. And I was flattening the planes and playing with tone and different techniques and simplifying things. And then I thought, I need a second panel. I've got this bit and I need this panel. I need something to go with it. So I painted this panel. You can see there's figures up in there, and in the first 2, in the woods, spirits, whatever. COVID did come in somewhere into the second panel. We had COVID. But this piece is really about life cycle. This is sort of birth to death. And that's what the outer panels became, is, when you get to a certain age, and I think we probably think about our life throughout our lives, but the older you get, the more you maybe consider it and the horizon in front of you. And this is where you exist, full of color, energy, life. That's what we're supposed to do with our time here. So I think you're just going to have to come and see the show, because this is the best we can do until the government lets us open doors. So that's it. What did we say, 45 minutes? And we did 46:12. Not bad. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
You have to pull that in.
I know that you can't hear me as well as you can hear Will, but if you have a chat, no, stay wait for a moment, because I can maybe read you questions.
Okay.
If you had any questions that you would like to ask Will right now, by all means, write them in the chat, and I will read them out to Will. I do have one question though, maybe while you're writing. Will, snow angels.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel there's a little bit of something disturbing in there. And I don't know if that was intentional, because I know it's a very positive, childlike image, but I almost see like the ice is breaking up and it's about to swallow him. Do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Well, sure.
Yeah.
That
back over?
No, we don't have, well, whatever. We can do it.
Yeah, sure.
The ice is breaking up, and that puts that person in a bit of a perilous position. But again, that's a bit about where we are now. And a few people did say, I think that person's dead on the ice. And yes, they do look like they're on a cross of sorts without the cross, a snow cross, but they also, you're either going to be engulfed in icy water and or they're enjoying themselves. So it's a little ambiguous, and that's what was intended, is to,
Okay.
so yeah, maybe that's his hope, or maybe they've gone crazy like some of us might. And that probably isn't the right terminology, but anyways.
No, so it's okay that I find it a little bit disturbing.
Yeah, no, it's there is some disturbing elements in, in a lot of the work. I try to put a little disturbing but I want you to stay there. So I try to paint enough around it that says, that's kind of a compelling image, but yeah, well, that is, even some of the political ones, I painted them with the same techniques and palettes, and I didn't change that. So I wanted to say, well, I want you to look at this. I didn't want it to be so horrific, that you weren't going to look at it. And you don't have to stay long and look at them, but I wanted them to, they use the same brushes and paints and techniques that I use on everything. So they're going to get that treatment, and you spend a few minutes looking at them and maybe appreciate them as paintings is not the right way to think about it. But at the same time, if you don't want to look, then you don't get to see what the messaging is. So
I have another question about, and hopefully everybody can hear me, about these paintings here. I love the texture. Can you explain them just a little bit more, what you mean by like the scraping, like as a painter, the scraping of your old paint and how they evolved, right? So like, what is your process here exactly?
Well, I use a palette knife. I don't paint with a knife often, but these are oil paints, first of all. So I work. I have a day job like many artists, and that means that I schedule myself in my studio about once a week. And so after a week, you get a little skin on the top of your oil paint. And so sometimes you can scrape it off and get enough workable paint. Sometimes there's not enough left. However, they still have their sticking power. So rather than trying to mix on a minefield of hills and valleys, eventually you can't do that. So I do mix a lot of my colors. So I like to have that. So I started scraping them with a palette knife. And then I just take those scrapings, which still have some adhesive qualities to the paint itself, and then I press them into the board. This is a gesso prepped board, just as I'd prep a canvas.
So it's not canvas, it's a hard.
It's a hard.
Yeah, okay.
They're hard panels. This wouldn't work on canvas. No. So they are, my other panels are just, scraps of, plywood or whatever, although there's no such thing as a scrap of plywood these days. But anyways, bits of whatever board I can get. They start out smooth. You can mix real nicely and do whatever you want. And then after a few weeks, it starts to, load up. But I thought, I'm wasting paint. I'm wasting this. And I've got all this paint, and 70% of it is wasted, and the other 30 I might get a little more weak and work it for a bit longer. So I thought I would experiment. I just like the idea of the process. It's random. So what will happen? I have literally, these are on the floor. I get a good palette knife. I scrape it on there. The next week I turn it around, go from the other direction, keep turning it, and that's how I end up with these. And the texture on them is amazing. I mean,
I'm trying to show that a bit. Like, they're so beautiful, the texture. Do you, are you able to look at a color and be like, oh, this green, I used that on Tuesday, July the 18th. You know what I mean? Like, is it that much of a diary entry or that nostalgic for you?
Well, maybe not to the date, but I do know the color, and I can point it out on paintings. That is yellow citron. I know that. That's emerald green. And cadmium, vermilion or whatever. So I know which paintings they potentially came off, because this painting would be dated for a certain amount of time, and I know from diaries when those pieces were created. So I know where the paints come from. I just don't know what painting. So is that?
And you were saying also that red line, this one, sorry, I'll turn the camera, relates. So this one right here relates in a sense to the one you're just talking about.
Well, kind of. I mean, I tend to work cyclically, and that is that these various themes come in these cycles, and then that could be years. Some of these things about the environment, I've been painting paintings for 40 years and more. So the interesting thing, this was painted quite recently, and that other large painting, and I didn't realize that till we got in here tonight, that this one called Carbon Redline, and it's again saying, the idea of a red line was coming into focus in terms of, that's what a tachometer reaches when at the top end, when an engine might be in trouble. And then this one having, red line on a blue planet, they were painted quite a long time apart. And I didn't realize when I named them that they both had the word, had red line in them, even though it was probably 8 months before I named the other one. And it was only here when we hung them. I thought, oh, that's an interesting coincidence. So
I'm just looking here. I'm looking to see if anybody has raised their hand. And I don't see that anybody has any physical questions that they need me or Monica to help unmute them for. So I'm just going to wait one moment and just see if anybody has any questions at all that they want to ask. Please write it in the chat and I'll gladly read it out for you. But in the meantime, Will, I know that we rushed through this pretty quickly. I had you on a very strict timer. Is there anything that you missed saying that you want to take a moment right now to say?
Geez, haven't I said enough?
Oh, you did great.
This is actually probably the most, this is maybe a bit uncomfortable because usually if you go to the opening or into a gallery, you have some social, just some conversation. And then you talk a little bit about the work, but to come in and sort of say, well, here's some of my thinking behind it, just to give you a little insights of that. But of course, when somebody looks at a painting, that's your role to provide closure or your read on that. So what I tell you is only, well, some of them are pretty blatant. Some of the narratives are fairly obvious, but, and landscape is landscape maybe. But other things that are more abstract, I think you just bring what you bring to it. And these are things that I bring as an artist. And I'm not sure if, if I didn't say a word about this painting, I don't know what would you take away from it? And it's just as valid. Well, almost, because it is my work. But it really is. And I joke. What you take away, is you may not connect what I put in. I mean, the left side panels pulled out simple forms that were used to, whether it's vertical line or in red, or whether it's a blue oval or black, and other shapes that are throughout the piece. I just wanted to emphasize some of the design aspects of shape and color that were used in the work. So that side was kind of like the start, of life. We get basic things. The reference to cherry blossoms is really, as I completed this, I started thinking, quite a bit about where I am in life, and Cherry Blossom Festival let's say in Washington is really about, let's all go look at the beauty and wonderful fragrance from the cherry blossoms that blossom in Washington in the spring. And there's a week or so that happens. In Japan, they have a cherry blossom festivals too, but with them, the cherry blossom festival, it's not just about the beauty, which is certainly about that, and the colors and the fragrance and getting out in the spring and things like that, and the buds showing and life starting to rebirth. But it's about the temporal nature of life to that festival. So they celebrate life and the temporal nature. The cherry blossom blooms, shows a full flower, and in a week or whatever that time period is, the very short time, the petals are dropping and life is finished for that blossom and it goes into a new stage. But that is really about thinking about you as a human being and how short life is and how to make, the best of what time you have. And so that's the reference in here is this is where you are in life, in these middle panels. Whatever point you are in those middle panels, this is your time to do what we're supposed to do. Find the joys of your life, relationships and beauty and people and whatever. So that's pretty deep by the time I finished doing this damn. But the other thing that I love is I got to use my big brushes.
Yeah.
Like I got to pull out brushes that I don't get to use on small paintings because they would, just aren't practical. They also take a lot of paint too, which is wonderful. Yeah, that's probably enough, right?
That is perfect, Will. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to unmic Will, because I just want to wrap up. Let me unmic him.
Sorry, we do have, I've unmuted Reva, if you'd like to speak.
Go ahead, Reva. Here, I'll turn you to Will. Go ahead, Reva.
This is so phenomenal. I have watched you paint for decades and decades, and this is such a mature bunch of work. No, don't show my name. Show the art. Show the art. Not, yeah, that's better. Thank you. Can you can you talk about how you float light and energy and movement right on the surface of the canvas? I really wish I could do that.
I'm just going to
It's like painting water, painting movement.
Oh gosh, Reva. I told you not to ask me anything difficult.
It's painting movement. How these it's so amazing seeing this body of work all together.
So I know this one has the movement in the water, but I know that this painting of Morning Light is one that has some of that movement you're talking about.
And the ice hut paintings too.
And the ice hut paintings as well. But in this one, so this one, if you notice, the brush strokes are rhythmic. So while I wanted this light, it's very important for me to paint the way that I want the light to hit or the paint to show. So when I do these lines that are curved, and squiggle, almost like a serpent when they move, that gives movement. I mean, if you see a snake on the ground and they're moving, it's just that it seems to be that squiggly motion, which is the thing that freaks me out the most about snakes, is that they startle me. But they startle me through that patterning and that movement, and that's the movement, that S movement. So a lot of these have that, whatever tones. I've used that as a device to see if that gave you that sense of things sort of dancing and moving a bit. And that's why I, put those strokes on in that way. And then some of the light aura you were talking about, maybe in that other, I know the one out of the ice hut. That was almost a dry brush wash put on into the sky part of that. And I use that to get a bit of atmospheric effects, so lay down some undertones, the darker sky, then lay in a lighter tone a few days later. The thing I love about oils is how it does different things at different times. So it gives you time to work with it, and the technique can shift. So sometimes you have to wait a few days, and sometimes you wait a week. You want it to dry a certain amount. Sometimes the surface has a little pull, so you get a little bit of light. As in this one, you can see a few spots. And this was probably a transparent color put on there, and in some parts dry brush. So
I want to be standing in that room with you and you're painting.
Well,
I might be the one who touches the painting.
Well, you'd be almost welcome to touch the painting. You'd be better than that.
Man,
you get close. You get close. Does that kind of give you,
Yeah.
Yeah, I should do some virtual classes.
You should,
In
yeah.
my spare time.
Okay, so unless there are any other questions, I'm going to let Will come along over here and read his chat because he's got a lot of positive feedback. And I'm just going to hop in front of the mic here Hello. And I just wanted to close by telling you about some of the cool programs that OMAH has coming up. If you liked this talk tonight, we have another one. It's a bonus edition history speaker series with Jill Price and John Savage. Jill Price actually has an exhibition upstairs called Unfurl, Unsettling the Archive from a More Than Human Perspective. So Jill Price and John Savage is a historian. They are going to have a speaking engagement called Let the Fur Fly, Wednesday, July the 14th at 7 p.m. So I think that could be a really, really cool opportunity. Everything for that is on our website. Jill Price is also doing Furry Fridays. So she has 2 different workshops there. There's children's workshops. They are minimal screen time, and then you go away for the week and you create a zine from the animal's point of view. So they run for 4 consecutive Friday mornings. They start at July the 9th. And then there is an adult workshop also called Unmake the Unwearable, where Jill will help you unmake, we joke, unmaking your grandma's fur coat. So taking something that's fur and maybe you wouldn't use it and turning it into something usable again. So again, Furry Fridays, they start July the 16th and they are half-day sessions online. They're virtual. There's 2 of those. So all that information is on our website if you're at all interested in those. We are also really excited. We're doing summer camps. Isn't that crazy? We're allowed to have minimal children in. So we have 9 full weeks of really exciting kids summer camps planned, starting on Monday, July the 5th. Every week is different. So sign your child up for a week or 2 or 9, whatever you would like to do. We also have some family programming coming up. You may remember last year there's See You on the Patio Friday evenings. That's a really cool thing that Aurelia is doing where they close the streets and you can wander. So almost really excited to be able to take part in that. That starts July the 2nd. Those are in the evenings. We will have a tent outside, out front. And we're going to be doing very simple art making activities for a toonie. So if you want to come with your family, it's a toonie a person or $5 for families up to 4, and you can sit in our tent and make a really fun, very simple art activity. The same night, Lindsay Earle, our history programming coordinator, is actually starting historical Aurelia guided walking tours. I think that's such a cool idea. So they will be running Friday night starting at 7 all summer long, and they start also on July the 2nd. And then if that's not enough, Saturday mornings, we are also going to be putting the same tent that we had up Friday night in front of OMAH in our courtyard. So even though the museum cannot be open right now, we will have a tent outside. And again, if you're at the market or at the library, drop by with your family. We will be doing a different art making project. Again, $2 a person. So $2 gets you a really fun little art making session. You can sit down and just do a brief art making session with us here at OMAH. Unless Will has anything else he would like to say. He's still reading all of his praise, which I just think is so lovely that you all wrote in to support him.
Yeah.
So lovely that you all joined us this afternoon or this evening as well.
We do have, Sienna has her hand up, so I'm just gonna allow her to talk here.
Go ahead. I'm going to move out of the way and let Will answer, okay? You wanna come around, Will?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Papa. I want to ask you, how long did you take it to paint one of the picture, and which one's your most favorite?
Oh, Olivia, thank you for that question, because I know you're painting away and inspired to paint yourselves, aren't you? So let me see.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a most favorite painting. What do you like the best? Which painting do you like the best? Or you pick 2 or 3.
I like the one, the big one, and I also like the one that's like the one with the nature.
Yes.
Like all that stuff.
Yes.
And I like the one behind you.
Well, that's close to where you live, isn't it? What about the ice hut? Do you like the ice hut?
Yeah. Wanna say hi to Deacon?
No.
I'll say hi to Deacon later.
Okay, say thank you.
Hi.
And say thank you, okay?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'll call you and talk in more detail. Glad you enjoyed the show, honey.
All right, if that is it, Will and I are going to be on our way. Congratulations, Will, that was really well done.
Thank you.
It was amazing.
And one last thing to anybody that's still out there that wrote all those really nice comments on the chat feature. I apparently sent my response to the panelists only, which I think would only be 2 of us. But thank you all, everyone, for joining me and joining us here at the gallery. And I hope we can make the show. And yeah, perhaps we could do a closing. We're kind of, that may be a possibility.
I should mention that you will all get a chance to see this exhibition in person. As soon as we find out that we can open our doors, it's obviously ready for you to see, and it will be up for some time after that as well. So you can all see it in person. Yes, definitely.
Okay, and thank you for your kind comments and nice to see you. Even though I'm looking at a great
I know.
back of an iPad, so can't really see.
They're looking at beautiful art.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much
coming.
for joining